Good evening and welcome to The Velocity of Now with me, your host Thomas Sheridan. It's the 22nd of April 2015. We're back live on the air. We had a technical hiccup last week and I had to pre-record the show in the end, so sorry about that. It was one of those things that couldn't have been helped. It was nobody's fault. So we're back again live on the air and it's good to be back. I'm feeling good. The weather has been absolutely fantastic in this part of Ireland the last few days. The sun is splitting the rocks. It's just beautiful. The sky is full of corvids. The beaches are full of people, and the waves are just full of surfers. And well, everything's right with the world as the green starts sprouting and the birds start singing. And what more could you want? What more could you want? And I have myself too. I have a lovely feeling of new, fresh beginnings inside me, and new opportunities and new paths and new directions. And so all good, and I hope the same is happening with you too. I hope your life is going in the right way, and I hope you're being creative. Like I always say, that this is the only path left to us, really, to like win the world for humanity, and win the world for the evolution of consciousness is creativity. It's the only battle we can really fight and win, because it's the only magic that we can fight back with. And that's the theme of tonight's show. It's about magic, specifically war magic. Now, you might find what I'm going to talk about very interesting, but also very surprising, because I may undo some of your preconceived ideas of those of you who are peace protesters and everything, because this is a deep subject and it's big, and it's what I've been wanting to talk about for a while, because it was when I was studying for Valpurgis Night Volume 1 and also Anvil of the Psyche. You can get my books on www.thomassheridanarts.com. There's a little tab up there called Bookshop on the right-hand side. And, the ritual aspects of propaganda, of mind control is one thing, but we forget that these are very deep-rooted aspects of human behavior, human society, and human consciousness that have been around with us forever. So I'll be talking about that in a minute. I just want to talk about something else. I don't know if some of you have seen my YouTube channel, thomassheridanarts.com, but I basically gave my farewell to the conspiracy world, to the alternative world. Now, I'm still keeping this show going, but this show's direction will change. It won't change drastically, because I'm probably already presenting the most original show out there on this alternative radio. But the focus will be more on creativity. I'll be covering the arts a lot more, but I'll also be talking about things like magic and things like that. To reinforce this idea, I was listening to the radio there during the week, and there was some guy on, and the absolute bollocks he was spouting. It was like, you think it was 2008 again, the Illuminati, they're going to kill us all with chemtrails. They go, the Illuminati, they're going to, Georgia Guidestones, and all this stuff. And it's like, okay, back in 2008 when we first heard this stuff, it may have grabbed us. But here we are in 2015, and these people are still churning this shite out. And it's tiresome. It's tiresome and pointless, because these are one-trick ponies, and this conspiracy alternative scene is full of nothing but one-trick. Well, not nothing, but there's quite a few people out there that really are warriors and making a difference. But it's filled with one-trick ponies. All you have to do is say Illuminati. All you have to say is this, that, and the other. And because they're a bunch of one-trick ponies who don't have anything else going on, this is why they've descended into things like thinking the earth is flat, and this is why it's all kinds of farces. This is why it's descended into things like neo-Nazism, biblical, Christian identity. I can't believe that one is coming back, that Jesus is a European and all this crap. And all this nonsense. This is the end. It's over. It's gone. But there are still some out there who think they can actually peddle this early kind of like conspiracy crap. There will be a new generation who comes on and believes it, but my God, what kind of lives do these people have, that they sit there day in and day claiming that the Illuminati are trying to kill them? My attitude was, yeah, hurry up and do it. Now, that's funny enough, I should mention that, because I remember when I first saw the Georgia Guidestones thing, my first reaction was, that's a bit weird. And it is a bit weird, isn't it? And I had this thing, maintain humanity's population under a certain amount. I think it was 100 million or whatever. And walking through a shopping mall today, my attitude now when I see that thing is, what can I do to help? It's like, are most people worth saving? I don't think so. I mean, you see them all walking with their the zombie apocalypse with the mobile device in their hands. I'm texting. My life is so rich. I'm putting selfies of myself up. I mean, are these people worth saving? Are you willing to risk your life? I'm going. The guy was on the radio going, "I'm going to fight the new world order. Yeah, I'm going to fight the new world order to save humanity." You want to save these guys? You want to save that? You want to save people who watch X Factor and live and die by it? You want to save people who go onto reality shows? You want to save One Direction? Man, if I had the opportunity, I'd do it. I'd take each one of them out slowly. I wouldn't want to save them. But for truth, man, we're fighting for truth. It's over. That stuff has to stop, because it's become a parody of itself. Satanic child abuse. I'm Nigel. I'm owner of Reptilian Resistance 2012 channel, and I'm concerned about satanic child abuse and cooking babies in the back of McDonald's. I was just a reptile. Come on, enough already. It's over, okay? Stop that shit. Do something positive with your life. Anyway, yeah, and like walking through the shopping mall today, I was like, we're gonna save. We got to wake. What was it, Michael? What's his name? Alex Jones. We got to wake up the people. Fuck that. These people could never be woken up, and if they were, they'd probably be dangerous. It'd be like giving an atomic bomb to a chimpanzee with epilepsy. Oh, last week's show I made an error. And I want to apologise for that, but it wasn't a huge error. But I said that the New York Hotel on 34th Street and 8th Avenue in New York was owned by the Mormons. I was wrong. Someone contacted me and says, Thomas, you're wrong about that. It was the Moonies. So it was the Unification Church, not the Mormons, which are the Latter-day Church of Jesus Christ and Latter-day Demons. It was the Unification Church, where they marry people. They marry geeky guys with hot, like, Korean chicks. That one. I'm not going to apologise to the Moonies, because they're a feckin' cult as well. They're all all cults. So anyway, that was my mistake last week. Now, when the person wrote to me to say this, I didn't immediately go on a rampage like the flat earth tosspots. And go, hey, you're evil, you're a psychopath, you're hateful, you're denying reality because I'm a truth guru and can never be wrong. No, I don't do things like that. I say thank you and I apologise. Unlike other people out there, I'm willing to admit I made a mistake. But then again, if you actually think the world is flat, what hope for you is there anyway? You could never be normal. That video I made anyway, it shows, I pointed out these chemtrails, these, whatever these vapor trails, whatever they are. I don't know what these things are. I just know they do look weird in the sky, but I don't know what they are compared to ones I grew up as a kid. And you can see them. They come up over the horizon and they bend in an arc over the horizon and drop down towards the other horizon, showing that the Earth, demonstrating clearly that you live on a sphere, because that's what that arc is. They can't see it. No hope for them. And I want to make this quite clear now, that when the day comes when the Illuminati are ready to wipe out the people who believe in the flat earth, please call me, because I want to witness this, because these people are also like the One Direction fans. They're not worth saving. Now, war magic, okay? I keep forgetting it's only an hour-long show now. I've only got 15 minutes and I've already been shiting my way through about 10 minutes of it, saying nothing. But anyway, that was a mistake last week. It was the Mormon Church, and no apology. It was the Moonies, sorry, and it wasn't the Mormon Church. And no apology to the Mormons, because you're douchebags too. Now, war magic. Now, let's talk about war magic, okay? Now, it may seem like a strange kind of idea, the idea that war itself is a magical ritual. But it is. It is a magical ritual. Very much so. That's why it exists. That's why we will never be rid of it. All these people who go, wouldn't it be better if we all just got along and had peace on? It's never going to go away. It's never going to go. It's always going to be there. But it's becoming quite disturbing now because of this technotronic kind of idea of transhumanism and drones. But the idea, and that's all magic as well. So, hunting magic was the origin of this. Now, what was hunting magic? Hunting magic is our ancestors used to go into the caves and they used to draw pictures of animals, like in Lascaux in the south of France, thousands and thousands of years ago. All the animals they used to hunt. And the idea of that was to invoke their energy into the animal so they could actually hunt the animal more successfully. Remember, they weren't killing for fun like these gobshites you see on Facebook. They were killing for food. Now, this then developed into wearing the skins of the animal. And so they would get the skin of a tiger or a lion or the skin of some kind of predator animal like that, a wolf, and they would wear it. And this was to invoke, to capture, to infuse the hunting capabilities of those animals into themselves. And that was the beginning of camouflage. Camouflage. The idea of masking yourself so the enemy doesn't know you're there. And that is like the most magical thing there is, because this is the illusion. You see, we're stepping into the illusion. We're changing consciousness. You look into the woods and you do not see the guy with the sniper's rifle aimed at you, because he is a magician. He's so well camouflaged. He's painted green and brown or in khaki, wherever the colour is, to blend in with their background. And he might put branches in his helmet or cover himself in foliage, and he is a magician. He's the magician of death. That's a sleight of hand. Camouflage is a sleight of hand. And camouflage is something that's always really interested in me. Because, you know, it's still around with us, like radar, avoiding. Things like stealth technology. That's magic. The plane is there in the sky, the ship is there in the sea, but the radar cannot pick up the electronic footprint or the radio footprint of the object, because it's invisible. It's a magical process. It has changed the consciousness of the radar operator. He doesn't see the beep, 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 like in that was that film Alien. To think of it close, beep, beep. That was all a bit stupid, wasn't it? Like in Alien, they have spaceships that can go to the other side of the universe, but they still have the machine that goes beep, 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 like Pac-Man. You think they'd have something better than that? But anyway, if they can get to the stars to mine them. But anyway, so they wouldn't go beep, beep, beep. Wouldn't do that, because there'd be nothing on the screen, but the plane was still there. Still there. The bomber was still coming in, but it wouldn't be seen because of a magical process, the camouflage. And this, the most advanced stealth technology, is nothing more than an updated version of hunting magic. The idea of disguising yourself so your prey and the animal cannot see you. Now, I said I was very interested in this idea, and one of the most amazing things from war history is a thing called the dazzle ships. Now, the origin of the dazzle ships, they claim it was the British Navy who developed them, but it wasn't. It was actually the Germans who tried it first back in World War One. And what they did was, now this, I cannot find, I've looked online for this story and I cannot find it, but I have read this in a book a while ago, and I did see a documentary on the BBC years ago about it. But the origin of the dazzle ships, the word dazzle does not signify magic. To dazzle, to bewilder. Now, to dazzle. Now, the idea of the dazzle ship was that the ship itself would present such an image, a camouflaged image, that your mind couldn't make sense of it. You couldn't tell what you were looking at because of the way it was painted. Now, the story that I first heard about was in World War One. They were bringing out these, before World War One, the original Kriegsmarine of the German Navy were parading battleships that came around the harbour in, I think it was near Bremen in the north the north of Germany on the Baltic Sea. And so these these admirals were all sitting there, and these war people were sitting there. And the first ship came around that was painted grey. Can you see it? Yes, we see it. The next one came around, was tried to bend it in with the background painted blue. The sky part was a light blue. The bottom part was a deep blue to hide it in the sea, or a deep green. Then they saw them all. And then someone said to them, did you see the last ship? Watch last ship. And it turns out that the last ship was literally painted pink, tangerine, and day-glow colours. Because their minds were so attuned to, and they didn't see it, attuned to expecting a ship that was painted in traditional camouflage. When something outrageous appeared, literally their brains shut off. They were bewildered. They were spellbound, and they did not see it. They did not, because these military minds, these programmed military minds, did not. They often have no creativity. Although war itself is an art, they had no creativity. They didn't see the dazzle ships. Now, like on all these shows, if you go to the newsymbolsmedia.tv page of this show, you get all the links. Now, during the First World War, they were always trying to come up with the new ways. One way was devised by a guy called Norman Wilkinson, was to paint them in a bewildering and bizarre scheme of cubist lines and strange geometric patterns. And these were called by the British the dazzle camouflage. They were first adapted by the British Admiralty, his version. I know the Germans were there first, and the US Navy. It was believed that while not making the ships invisible to the enemy, the strange camouflage would make it hard to work out the size of the vessel or what direction it was heading. And you have to see the paint schemes on these ships. They're like cubist. They're so surreal. Like I said, I'll show you the link. And they painted them in incredible colours. Each ship was painted with its own unique pattern, so the enemy would not be able to work out the size of the vessel. Very handy for firing up gun at it, or where it's going. Your brain could not figure this out. You know the famous old story that when the Spanish first landed in Mexico or in Central America, they showed a portrait of the king of Spain to the natives, saying that this is our great leader, and all they said was, we see nothing. What are we looking at? And slowly after the guy began to explain to them this was like a painting by Velasquez, so it was like almost picture perfect or something. He started to explain to them, look, here's an eye, here's a chin. And then slowly the natives began to see the king's face in the portrait. It had to be pointed out. So this worked on the same idea, that if the brain has not been accustomed to these shapes and these designs, these geometric designs, on something as bizarre as a battleship, it does not expect them. Now, each ship was painted with its own different style, so the enemy would not work out the class of the vessel. So whether it was a submarine destroyer, whether it was an aircraft carrier, all had their own thing. The use of dazzle camouflage was widespread, but the actual effects were very uncertain. It became very hard to work out if the camouflage was having the desired effect. Well, I think it was. I think it had tremendous effects. And by the time the World War II came out, the technology was much more advanced, and the extensive use of planes by the enemy, camouflage became defunct because they couldn't fly over it, which means that they were using as far as like World War II because it was working. And these ships were painted in the most incredible. Even when you look at them now, 100 years later, you cannot believe what you're looking at. It's mind blowing. So, this is magic. This is the idea of This is the absolute, epitome of magic. That you change consciousness. So there you are, a gunner on a German warship or any Japanese or any warship, and suddenly this thing appears that has all kinds of weird shapes and all, geometric. You just not expect it. Your mind cannot even comprehend it, and then the next thing it blows you to bits. And that's magic. That's hunting magic. And that's how long this thing is. Now we say, it's war, it's just killing and murder. Yes, but there's also, it's all about it's war is just as much psychological as it is like literal in terms of fighting and tactical and all those and strategic. This is why German civilians held out when things were beyond hope, to the final like minutes of World War II, that Hitler had this wonder weapon. Just using the term wonder weapon, Wunderwaffen, was enough to get people to hold on to the impossible. As Russian bullets were flying down the street in Berlin, there was still a belief that the Führer would unleash the wonder weapon. And there was no wonder weapon. Well, I believe the wonder weapon was actually the escape of Adolf Hitler and his wife Eva Braun on Walpurgis night 1945. I think that was, when the magician leaves the stage, poof, a puff of smoke and he's gone. The puff of smoke was Berlin. Berlin went up with a puff of smoke and the magician left the stage. In fact, Albert Speer, the guy who was... And this is another thing. If I see one more gobshite post a link to Facebook saying, Hitler, he fought the banks. He stood up to the banks. That is such crap. If it wasn't for the Rockefellers, the globalists, and the Ford Company, they wouldn't have even got to the war. And anyway, Albert Speer, his armaments minister, was actually paying off these banks and arranging payments in Switzerland right as Germans were being murdered in the streets of Berlin by the Red Army. So that's the tangent I went off on there. But anyway, so they were held out for the wonder weapon. But Albert Speer, this final words to Hitler was having doubts, saying, should I leave Berlin and try and open up a second front in Bavaria with the remainder of the army there? And Albert Speer said to him, and this is an exact quote, when the curtain closes, the main actor should be on the stage. And that was the wonder weapon. When the puff of smoke was Berlin going, and Hitler vanished to South America. That's what the wonder weapon was. But you see, again, psychological warfare. And my book, Walpurgis Night, I covered it all. Excuse me. I covered it all in terms of how they used magic to get into the German people's minds to fall for this crap and play on their insecurities. But, the whole thing of the Nuremberg rallies, which I'll be covering in Walpurgis Night Volume 2, and the power and the intensity of that to actually change. That's where they learned how to make Super Bowl specials and all this kind. That's where that comes from. The Nuremberg rallies. That's all war magic. And the light shining up into the sky and all this kind of thing. And the spotlights merging in the middle. It's all very, it all goes right back to our ancestors dancing around the fire the night before the hunt in bear skins and in wolf skin. It goes right back to that. It's the same thing. It's no difference. It just changes with time. And the banging of drums. That's, that was, when the ancient armies in Ireland faced each other across the fields or anywhere in the world, they would blow these the Gaelic armies, the Celtic armies did it too, these massive horns, these trumpets that would sound across the valley, and these people banging these huge drums. And this was to terrify the enemy. This was an animal. The army itself was a collective animal. A collective animal making its war cry, its scream, announcing its intentions. And this was to terrify you. And the other ones on the other side would do the same. Now, war magic, another example of that is the two-fingered salute that that English people have used to give you Americans give you one finger, the English give you the V sign, the two fingers. Where that comes from is the Battle of Agincourt. The English and Welsh were incredible longbowmen. In England and Wales, every young man was to practice bow all the time. So when they went to war in these peasant armies in the 13th and 14th century, they had the longbow. The longbow was literally a nuclear weapon of its day. If you had 5,000 archers shooting those arrows up into the sky, raining down the French cavalry, it was literally like a cluster bomb. They had no chance. And so, but what happened was when the English and the Welsh archers were captured by the French, they would cut those two fingers off because those two fingers are what pulls the arrow back. When you draw the flechette back in the bow, those two fingers you release, and those fingers used to be cut off by the French, so they could so they could never fight again. They could never pull a bow again. At Agincourt, they gave them the two fingers to the French knights, saying, "We have these fingers, and you're screwed." And that's where that comes from. That's magic as well. waving the two fingers, because the French were so decimated by the English and Welsh bowmen in the army of Henry V that they lived in terror of the longbow. And so they showed them the two fingers. Now, there was also a class element of that as well, because the bow allowed the poor and the peasantry to take out a knight until the French developed techniques and made it in such a way that they could act, that the bow was it was obsolete. Then they came up with the crossbow, and the crossbow was basically a gun that fires a bolt, and kind of an arrow-like bolt at tremendous speed. We forget how dangerous those things were. They could pierce a suit of armour no problem. And there was all these things like saying that, how dare the peasants be given crossbows because they're able to take out knights. Oh, good. See, the whole thing is they don't like it's just like gun control. They don't want the ordinary people having this stuff. But yeah, the two fingers, that's magic. Two fingers in the air, that's where that comes from. That's why Churchill used it in that famous propaganda photograph in World War II. Magic, war magic. And also at the battles you have the flags and regalia. Flags and regalia are sigils. That's all they are. The colours of the regiment, sigils. That's all they are. That's all. That's why. And the amount of magic and symbolism. When people say, "Oh, they're so symbolic," that is a magic in itself. When a French legion lost its eagle, the eagle which they adopted from the Roman army, the actual legion would be discontinued. This is why they would fight the most incredible fights to hang on to the eagle, the regimental eagle. And because it was the end of the regiment. It was great shame that eagle was captured by an army. That's why if you go to the British War Museum in London, you see the French eagles from the Napoleonic Wars all lined up there. Some of them are just, some of them almost have like magical stories connected to them, like the Scotsman who stole one at Waterloo. If you got a French eagle, you were literally, it was like being the heavyweight champion of the world. You got vast amounts of wealth. You became like, the women all wanted to sleep with you, and because you cursed. It's a curse when you got the eagle from the French standard bearer. The regiment was discontinued, and that meant that you had the magic to end a line of a military order. This is the magic of war. It's people just say, oh, it's tradition. Oh, it's not. It's all magic, and so are the regalia, the flags. This is why the famous scene of the American troops pushing the flag up at Iwo Jima. That was that's the sigil, the sigils of the United States Corporation in the Pacific Islands being raised. The Russian sigil, the Soviet communist sigil, being waved over the ruins of the Reichstag in Berlin. These are iconic photographs. These are sigils. It's all rituals. The United States ended, it stopped being a democracy. No, it never really was. But that symbol of on Walpurgis night again, of the helicopter being pushed off the aircraft hangar at the fall of Saigon into the sea. Well, that was a Dionysian ritual. That was because the Dionysus always dies by water. So the American helicopter, the American participation in Vietnam, in Indochina, was officially ended with that very significant killing of the helicopter. That was the end of the notion that Americans were good in the world. That is the self-belief that they had, we are good people, when they were beaten by, when a country was based, their massive military might was defeated by this like small nation made up of volunteers, civilian troops, with help from China, of course. But you see that's why the Vietnam War so deeply affected the American psyche. The regalia, the symbols. That's why you have in the Anvil of the Psyche. I talk about this. Why do you think you have the 5-pointed star in the American tanks? The Russian tanks, all of them. Lots of them have it. The Chinese, they all have the 5-pointed star. That's a pentagram. It's a magical symbol. The swastika is a magical symbol, and the German of the cross, the Iron Cross. That brings us to medals. Medals are also talismans as well. Watch that movie, The Iron Cross, with James Coburn, Sam Peckinpah film from the early 70s. It's one of the best war movies ever made. And it shows you the lengths that the Prussian aristocrat is going to try and get that Iron Cross. And there's a great scene where James Coburn, who's a lieutenant, goes, I've got one here, you can have mine, I don't want it. He's no longer under the magic spell of this piece of metal. What you're giving that medal is what you're giving a medal for is really to say you have the magic to survive murder. You were not killed. You are an immortal in terms of combat. So when you come home and they pin that medal on you, a service medal on you, that medal really says that talisman is that you're immune to bullets. You're immune to being killed. That's what that's all about. That's a talisman to show that you're invincible. And war memorials, I know people are going to find this controversial, but what they call them the fallen. In England, they say that, so this next year's all, at the moment we're all about the 1914 to 1918, the Great Wars they call it. Next year will be 1916. We'll have that whole thing in Ireland with our fight for independence. But the whole Somme thing, the Battle of the Somme, will be really pushed. They keep calling them the fallen. It's a nice way of saying the failures. That's really what the elites mean when they say that. They failed. They were killed. They were not immortal. They did not get a Victoria Cross, an Iron Cross, or a Congressional Medal of Honor. They are the fallen. That's what that means. They did not have this magical ability to survive bullets. It's magic. That's all those things are. During the First World War, in fact, there was in the trenches of the Western Front, British troops, regardless of their religion, were doing things looking for holy medals, Catholic holy medals. If they were Jewish or Protestant, they were carrying, and on the German side as well, they were carrying things like St. Christopher medals or St. Joseph medals, just because they needed something to believe in that would keep them alive, because there was so much carnage around them, and the mortality rate was so enormous in the Somme on the Western Front and in places like Passchendaele and Verdun, that even a Catholic medal in the hands of a Jewish soldier was something that could keep. And these places were dark and they were charged. And this is why you had these paranormal events like the Angel of Mons, where people saw these angels. Like, this is war. This is why I don't... I have all these people saying these things about, like, soldiers are just dumb animals, like Kissinger said. But in reality, soldiers who go and fight in combat situations have experienced a level of the supernatural and a level of, they just don't tell them this, of magic and involvement with magic that we will never understand. That's only soldiers understand this among themselves. They don't articulate this way because they're never told us this way, but that's exactly what they're going through. Now, I was speaking there about propaganda and stealth and psychological warfare. And there are elements that combine the both. And this is the idea of, when it becomes magical warfare. Now, you had people like Dion. Let's look at the World War II, right? You had, on the German side, you had basically an occult fascist force, an occult socialist fascist force on the whole National Socialist side. Some people early on, like Lewis Spence in England, figured this out. So did Dion Fortune. I have Dion Fortune's, the book on Dion Fortune called The Magical Battle of Britain, where they were performing rituals every so often against the German Third Reich magic. Of course, it didn't work. But that's because Dion Fortune, although she wrote some great books on things like psychic attacks, Dion Fortune was not a very good magician. She really wasn't. Now, the greatest war magician in England of World War II was Jasper Maskelyne. Now, Jasper Maskelyne he died in 1973, he was born there in 1902 or 3. And he was a British stage musician, a very popular one. You can actually see old Pathé films of him eating razor blades. And he was, a regular stand-up stage magician. A brilliant one. The Great Masculine. This is, fantastic posters. And he wrote a book back in the 30s called The Book of Magic, where he showed how he did his stage tricks. Now, we think that stage magic and ritual magic are completely different. They're not really when you think about it. Like when people say, Derek Okora, he's such a joke. He's such a, he's a con artist who does, but Derek Okora is, in a funny kind of way, this is why I find Derek Okora kind of likeable. I don't care if he's reaching spirits from the other side or not. The fact is that he can actually pull that off. And people in the audience don't want to kill him is a magical thing by itself. He uses everything from his Scouse accent to his likeable personality to put on a really entertaining show. And if you were to ask those people, did you really think he was contacting your Uncle James or your Auntie Mary? They would probably say, I don't really care. That was enough for me, him pretending he did. And that's magic in itself. You had to pull that off. Now, Jasper Masculine was that kind of stage magician, but he was so much more. He was definitely one who had a deep occult training. Now, in World War II, he volunteered to join the Royal Engineers. These are the guys in the British Army who build bridges and railways and all this kind of thing, and buildings and installations that are used in war. And offering his skills in camouflage, he blew the minds of the British officers who said, like, how clever are you? What can you do? He created the illusion of a German warship sailing through the Thames River in London, and he did it using a small model and mirrors to make them believe a full-size German battleship had sailed into the heart of London, and that's why he got the job. So they gave him a camouflage development and training centre in Farnham Castle, which is really a magic centre. You see, this is a magic and illusion centre. And he decided to actually take it one step further than even camouflage, and he created these ideas of great all these James Bond kind of devices, like things hidden in cricket bats, weapons hidden inside maps, hidden inside playing cards, all kinds of neat things. But he did two amazing events that probably changed World War II. The first one was he created the city of Alexandria in Egypt in the wrong place. Now, how he did that was Rommel and the Africa Corps were tearing up the British in North Africa, and he was marching on Egypt. Now, it was a typical German, World War II German kind of mobile warfare type war. Although it was in the desert, there's still the usual thing. The air support comes in first, bombs the crap out of the place, ground troops come in. It depended upon the Luftwaffe making the initial strike. It was obvious that the next target was the Egyptian city of Alexandria on the north coast of Egypt on the Mediterranean. Masculine, what he did was he made a false Alexandria. Now, he did it at night because the bombing raids would have took place at night because they were easy targets, the Luftwaffe, for anti-aircraft and RAF planes. So they were bombing at night. What he did was he found a bay a few miles up the coast that was similar in shape to the bay around Alexandria. And he got the engineers even to change slightly the shape of the coastline and then place lights all around it. In the desert. It was a complete desert where nobody was there. And Masculine had them all place lights around the desert to mimic the streets and the buildings of Alexandria. Now, those days, you could hear German bombers coming from miles away, or your Allied bombers. It was very strange. Like, I can remember older members of my family telling me that their earliest memories, both the ones in England and the ones in Ireland, was the German bombers coming in, and they used to hear the whirrings of the sort of strange kind of clockwork whirring of the Hinkle bombers, because the engines were not synchronized on the Hinkle bombers, so they made a very specific whirring noise that you'd hear for a long time. Remember, the war was a quieter place even in World War II, so the lights would go out, you'd have a blackout. So when the German bombers were sighted coming along the coast from where the German positions were, they had all the lights switched off in the city of Alexandria, and these lights in the desert of the fake Alexandria switched on. This is classic magic. This is classic sleight of hand. The Germans, assuming that the lights were the lights of Alexandria, bombed an empty desert. As a result, no British equipment. It was called the Phantom Army the Phantom War. And what happened was, it allowed the British to feel this sense of, again, a magical sense of being more clever than Rommel, who was considered almost like a supernatural entity in himself, even by the British. And they turned to war. And that was the end of the Afrika Korps and the Allied victory in North Africa. But that was Maskelyne's fake Alexandria that did that. He so impressed the British High Command that they gave him anything he wanted. And in the run-up to D-Day, he did it again. He created a fake army. They did things like make inflatable tanks of rubber, of a Sherman tank, and scattered them in parts of England to make it look like the invasion was going to happen from Dover across to Calais, rather from the south coast of England around Portsmouth and places like that, and Plymouth, heading towards Normandy. And the Germans really believed it, and they built up their stone wall, their Arden fortress around that part of. This is one of the reasons they got caught with their knickers down at D-Day, is because Rommel and Rommel had set up the Iron Wall, believing that this. You see, he'd been outfoxed twice by Maskelyne. That there was reconnaissance aircraft were coming back and showing images of American tanks all over England, aircraft, and they were just blow-up models, full-scale blow-up models, but made very convincingly. When you look at them from a distance, and not even a long distance, they look like an actual Sherman tank. They look like an actual Spitfire, and they weren't. They were rubber, and these things were being attacked by the Germans, or worrying the Germans to the point where they're putting all their forces in Calais when the attack was to be in Normandy. And another aspect of this again was, because Spain was allied, well, they were kind of like, not direct, they weren't in the Axis, but they were kind of allied with the Third Reich. The British Navy dropped a dead body off the coast of Spain, again with a suitcase, and the suitcase again was giving false information of a British invasion not in Normandy, an Allied invasion not in Normandy. That's magic again. And this is really what won World War II from the Allied point of view. It was just as much the idea of sleight of hand and magic. And Jasper Maskelyne played an enormous part in this. In fact, so few people know about him. I only heard about him about 20 years ago for the first time on a Channel 4 documentary in England. But so few people knew about him. But yet this guy was incredible. And he took stage magic and he brought it to the war. But because he changed the consciousness of the Third Reich military, it was an act of ritual magic. That's all magic is. It's creating a pure stream of energy. And the pure stream of energy is to win wars, is to psychologically outmaneuver your enemy. Now, when the Gulf War II started, you had this whole magic ritual performed by the Bush administration. Remember Colin Powell with his PowerPoint slides? To have people believe that there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. And there wasn't. There was none. They didn't exist. But they made such a convincing performance, a convincing black magic performance, that they They got their war. They got their invasion. This was just to copper fasten the concept in the heads of the population. Now, there were huge anti-war protests around the world. There was an enormous one in London on the eve of Gulf War II that had millions of people in it. And to this day, people still say, quite rightly, we had all this war, so many people marched in an anti-war protest in London, and Blair still went to war with Bush in Iraq. Well, here's something that's going to completely blow your mind. Anti-war protests are pro-war magic. See, what they do is, the anti-war protesters put a curse upon themselves. When they march against war, what they're creating is war consciousness. They've already made the assumption that the war has begun. This is why there's no attempt to stop these anti-war protests, from Vietnam to Gulf War II to anywhere, because they infuse war consciousness in the population. The people marching and the people at home watching know there's going to be a war. This demonstration against the war is very similar to what they call cancer awareness. Cancer awareness makes you think about cancer all the time. It makes you think about the war on cancer. But it doesn't cure cancer, it doesn't eradicate it, it doesn't deal with it. It creates awareness. And so anti-war demonstrations create awareness. And the magic, the black occult of this is deeply infused in modern popular culture. You look at the Vietnam War, whenever you see, and the Simpsons did they did this thing. They were on Ken Brockman on the news on Springfield, on Springfield. He says, and now here's a montage about the Vietnam War with the usual songs and videos, and again it shows all around the Watchtower by Jimi Hendrix playing, and American troops walking through, Saigon or through the jungle. So you always think of these songs and war together. Those songs infuse war. Every Vietnam movie ever made makes a big point, with the exception of Full Metal Jacket, which is the best one, makes a huge point of putting in the pop music of the time, because it creates war magic consciousness. So when there's a war going to happen, I know people from the goodness of their heart want to get involved and stop it. The reality is, what you're doing is actually ensuring it, because you're giving the gigantic ritual the black magicians in power need to bring that war into reality. So when 2 million people marched in London or wherever it was to stop Gulf War II, thinking they were protesting against Gulf War II, they were guaranteeing it, because they were actually saying it's already happened. This is why I'm always saying protesting is a very dodgy thing. It's a great way of networking and meeting people. But what protesting really does, it's just like voting. It enforces and validates the control grid. It's just like when the magician walks in, stands on the stage and says, do I have a volunteer from the audience? I'm going to do a hypnotism trick now. Can I have a volunteer from the audience to hypnotize? And that's just what it is. And a guy will walk up on the stage going, is anybody here who believes they can't be hypnotized? And the guy will walk up on the stage and say, you'll never hypnotize me. And he's hypnotized. It's the same. That's what anti-war protests are. We're not going to have a war. But you just said we will. By being here, you've created war consciousness. And that's why all these left-wing groups like the Socialist Workers' Party and all these other groups and all these lefty groups, very heavily involved in it. CND and all this stuff. I pointed out there a while ago that CND's logo, the upside down Y with the line through it, is actually a rune inside the circle. That's actually the SS rune of death, end of life. And CND are using an SS symbol signifying death that was put on SS graves as their anti-nuclear sigil. That tells you everything you need to know about who's behind it. We look at CND, it's the usual toffs, the usual, Cambridge, Eton, Harrow, Tufts. It's all about magic. War is about nothing else. Even the killing, the dying, that's what the songs are about. You listen to so many war songs, they're very strange lyrics. They're almost like they're religious in nature. Because this is how war is. This is why war is given this rule. This is why you have the Queen at the Cenotaph in London laying the wreath on Armistice Day, the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. 11, 11, 11. You think that's by accident? You think they're taking the piss when they do that? No, this is ritual. This is ritual. The number 11 is a strange number. It's a number that doesn't exist in this reality in terms of how it can be used in equations and so on. It's a number that 11 is a number that hints at the non-material, should we say. And that number 11 appears a lot in war. And 11th of November is a significant day in many wars. 11 and that 11/11s and so on. If you watch the film Saving Private Ryan, it's very difficult to watch that opening scene. It's really just a horrific snuff movie, and that's what the American Airborne, or what was it the Airborne, or was it the First Army? Whatever one, I think it was the First Army Infantry. There was a belief that the Americans were not hard enough to fight against the Third Reich, so they deliberately threw them to the dogs on Omaha Beach, knowing that they were going to meet the most horrific German resistance. Because the British, when they landed in Normandy, they were making cups of tea on the beach. They met no German resistance. But the Americans got it horrifically, and that was a baptism of fire. That was, they knew they would survive it. They would just keep pouring US troops onto the beach. Didn't matter how many were killed, but until the beach was captured. And this was to infuse the magical idea in the American consciousness that we can do this. We're as good as the British. We're as hard as them in terms of fighting the Germans, and we can defeat the Germans. And that was part of the plan, and that was the sacrifice. And when you watch that opening scene, that movie, it's a snuff movie. It's horrific to watch. But that was a magical ritual. That was the purpose of that. It would always be infused. You go to Normandy today, you wouldn't know anything ever happened there. And yet, can you imagine the energy, the levels? That's why in that scene, there's one scene in that movie. Soldiers in the heat of the most appalling battles often go into a psychedelic or shamanic state. This is commonly reported. There was bullets flying, there was people screaming, there was bombs exploding. And then the soldier says, and suddenly it felt like time had stopped still. Sounds became strange, and the next thing I remember is I was safe. And you see that done quite well in the opening scene of Saving Private Ryan. Tom Hanks enters into a kind of altered reality, and that altered reality, some people have speculated, is they literally leave the intensity of the magical, like the black magic, occult magic, the intensity, the pure stream of energy in such a horrific experience like that literally causes some to leave this reality. And maybe they do, for all we know. Maybe they do, not just not just psychologically, maybe even mentally. There's so many stories. How did you survive that horrific battle? I don't remember. I remember charging into it and everyone around me was falling down dead. Next thing I remember is I was back home. And when soldiers talk about post-traumatic stress, what they're really saying is that they're almost going, and I know this is not to disrespect troops who served in military and's been in these battle situations, but many of them will tell you secretly that the point when they felt the most alive was the point that they were closest to death. And that's why many of them have difficulty fitting back into civilian life. Their marriages fall apart, and so on. If you have people listening to the show, you talk to your grandparents who fought in wars and stuff, and they'll tell you the same thing. It's very difficult because the comradeship and the closeness and the sense of bonding, it was so deep. It was like human relationships times 100. And that brings us right back to the caves, when our ancestors sat in the cave under the fire, drew the animals on the wall they wanted to hunt, dressed up in the animal skins, and those drums were banging so loud, and they were chanting in the light of the fires as the lights flickered on the walls of the cave, showing the animals they were trying to hunt in order to survive, to keep the tribe in survival, to keep the family in survival, with their hunting magic. You may say to yourself, I'm totally a pacifist, I'm against war and all this, but the chances are, if it wasn't for that, for the development of hunting magic, we probably wouldn't be here today. Because human beings, despite being animals, developed one capability that no other animal developed, and that's magic. And magic is creativity and ritual. And this is why I always make a point of stressing how important it is. And so have many artists, the like of everyone from James Joyce to Picasso. What do you think Guernica was? Doesn't Guernica even remind you of those kind of paintings you saw in the south of France at Lascaux? Very similar in style. What Picasso was doing was hunting magic on the Germans who bombed Guernica. And you know what? His magic spell worked. Because the German military that bombed Guernica and caused Picasso to paint that mural were defeated. Thank you very much. This is the Velocity of Now with me, your host, Thomas Sheridan. And I'll see you all next week, and feck 'em if they can't take a joke. Good night.